I knew the dinner was a setup the moment they let me arrive early. High society doesn't do accidents, and it definitely doesn't do generosity. Being early gives you access you didn't earn, which is exactly how they see how you behave when you think no one is watching. The gate opened immediately, no questions asked, no call placed inside. My name had already been approved hours ago, which told me I wasn't really a guest. I was a variable. Something they wanted observed, not welcomed. Inside, the house was quiet in that unsettling way only generational money can afford. No echo of staff movement, no sense of urgency, no noise that hadn't been planned. Even the chandelier dimmed slightly as I stepped in, not because of automation, but because someone upstairs had decided the tone needed softening. I paused for exactly 3 seconds before moving again. That wasn't hesitation. It was theater. I wanted whoever was watching to register that I understood timing, that I knew rooms like this were instruments, not spaces. Later, I would find out that 5 people noticed that pause. More importantly, they disagreed on what it meant. The dining room smelled faintly of polish and cardamom, a deliberate mix of colonial restraint and cultural reassurance. The table was set for 9, with 8 chairs clearly accounted for and one conspicuously unclaimed, mine. The host appeared as if summoned by my attention. Late 50s, immaculately contained. The kind of man whose influence had survived 3 political eras because it never announced itself. He smiled like we'd spoken recently, even though we hadn't. "You're early," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I assumed you'd want to see how I wait." His smile widened slightly, but not in approval. It was cautious, the way people smile when they realize they're being watched too. The other guests arrived in clusters, never alone. People like this don't travel solo unless they're making a point. Each entrance shifted the atmosphere subtly, as if invisible negotiations were happening without language. No one introduced anyone. At this level, names aren't exchanged, they're absorbed. If you don't know who someone is, it's because you're not supposed to yet. The media heiress arrived last as expected. Always last. It's a control tactic disguised as indifference. She kissed the host's cheek, then nodded at me like she'd already read my file. She had. Dinner began without ceremony. No speeches, no clinking glasses, no performative warmth. That alone told me this wasn't a social gathering. It was operational. The conversation stayed intentionally hollow at first. Schools, architects, travel complaints that were really complaints about other people's ambition. Everyone laughed just a fraction too late. Not because things were funny, but because timing mattered. I matched their rhythm, though it took effort. I was conscious of everything at once, the senior advocate never touching his phone, the bureaucrat using first names for staff and surnames for billionaires, the tech founder glancing at the media heiress before finishing sentences. Everyone at that table had leverage on everyone else, including me. They just didn't know how much yet. The host's daughter was placed beside me, of course. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She looked through me as if checking reflections in glass. "So," she said softly, "how exposed do you think you are right now?" I didn't flinch. "Less than you think," I said. "More than I'd like." Her lips curved, amused. "Good answer," she said. "Wrong, but good." We ate slowly. No one reached for seconds. Consumption at this level is symbolic, never indulgent. Midway through the meal, the senior advocate finally spoke. He mentioned a pending case without giving details, just enough context to see who shifted. It wasn't information, it was bait. The bureaucrat leaned back. The tech founder stiffened. The media heiress blinked once. I stayed neutral. They all noticed. What they didn't notice was why. I had already read the draft judgment, not because I was powerful, but because I was useful in the right direction. The conversation drifted naturally toward ethics, as it always does. Ethics is the velvet glove that hides intent. They spoke abstractly, safely, like people discussing sharks while standing firmly on land. Then came the real test. The media heiress turned to me and asked casually if I'd worked with him once. She didn't say his name, she didn't need to. I nodded and said it had been brief. "Would you work with him again?" She asked. Every instinct in my body wanted to answer honestly. "I didn't. I'd wait," I said, "to see who survives the quarter." The silence that followed wasn't shock or approval. It was calculation. That was the moment I felt myself move from prospect to instrument. Dessert arrived untouched. The host stood for a toast that said nothing explicitly and implied everything: continuity, discretion, trust. I raised my glass last, which mattered more than arriving early ever had. After dinner, the room fractured into smaller conversations. Corners, garden walks, strategic isolation. I was pulled aside by the advocate, then by the bureaucrat, each offering compliments layered with warnings. "You think well," the advocate said quietly. "But be careful. Thinking is loud." On the drive home, my phone buzzed 3 times. 3 different people, same message in different words, welcome. I didn't reply because I finally understood what that dinner really was. It wasn't a recruitment. It was a trap. And traps only work if someone believes they're caught. Over the next month, things moved too smoothly. Approvals came faster than they should have. Resistance evaporated. Competitors began making mistakes so obvious they felt staged. That's because they were. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. A public execution disguised as journalism, flawlessly researched and impossible to refute. The media heiress's fingerprints were invisible, but unmistakable. The man destroyed by it was someone I'd known for years. Someone I'd warned. Someone who hadn't listened. I attended the next dinner. Same house, same table, same careful quiet. One seat was unclaimed again. This time it wasn't mine. It was his. The host's daughter leaned toward me and spoke almost kindly. "Do you know why you're still here?" I shook my head. "Because you never asked us for anything," she said. "And because you gave us exactly what we needed without knowing why." That was the lie. I had known from the beginning. From the moment they let me arrive early. From the way they placed me last, from the fact that they tested my silence instead of my ambition. What none of them realized was that I wasn't being measured. I was measuring them, that article? I tipped the journalist months earlier, quietly and indirectly. Not to destroy my competitor, but to see who would pull the trigger once given cover. The answer had been unanimous, including the woman sitting beside me. High society thinks in terms of loyalty. I think in terms of predictability. I stayed, I benefited, I played my role. But I never belonged to them. I belonged to the moment after. Because when rooms like this finally turn on themselves, and they always do, I won't need to move. I'll already be placed.